Hello, folks. Welcome to Bank Holiday Friday in the US. Today is Juneteenth, and as it's Bank Holiday, I assume that I'll be largely talking to myself. But I figured it would be a good time to just do a sort of unstructured live stream where we go through chunks of how I work, how I build from concept into a semi-fully fledged product. There's only so much you can do on a live stream, and just generally work through, the things that we do here at Concept to Cloud on a daily basis, pretty much. So that when people try and understand how we work, we can demonstrate large chunks of this. So the idea that I had for today, and this is highly unscripted and highly unstructured, so bear with me as we work through it, is we're going to go through how to get from like an Excel model to something more structured, more secure, and easier to deliver for end users. Now, of course, what does that look like? So in the grand scheme of things, you want to start with the ability to be able to ship some data to a customer. In the example we're going to go with today, we're going to have a look at a sort of healthcare model, like, pharmaceutical pricing type thing. Completely synthetic, just trying to explore an idea together. And as we go through that, you want to be able to go from something that involves sending an Excel spreadsheet to potential customers to actually delivering a product that you can maintain, enhance, improve upon. And that can come about in a number of different ways. Now, the most obvious one is to be able to expose some form of analytic platform. And so we'll have a look in a bit at Saiku, which is a tool that we build here at Concept Cloud that allows you to do open source analytics. But of course, it's not the only way that you deal with these things today. And in exploring other ideas, we're going to have a look at the potential of leveraging the data using an LLM and how to explore data sets using Saiku and a bit of Claude. And then we're also going to have a look at how you might also deliver the same product using Excel, but connected to a backend data source so that you're not just shipping around static data. And then also, finally, how to potentially build out a completely custom product and what you would do to be able to, provide some of that. So with all that being said, I'm going to find the right screen. Here we go. And I'll also try and find the Zoom button as I transition across to Excel. There we go. So if I make this a bit bigger by finding Zoom. Now, I definitely don't use Excel very often, so you have to bear with me whilst I click badly around things. But I made this, synthetic dashboard the other day that's sort of reminiscent of some of the things that I've used in the past when I've been dealing with model transition and how to turn this thing into something that is, more useful for consumers, something that you can get to market quickly and really turn into a minimal viable product, as the jingle has just said at the start of this show. And so, inside of this, we've got some key metrics. This I knocked up using Claude, by the way. So bear with me. But we've got pharma, commercial, sales, performance overview, some key metrics. And then if I click through to some of the data, you can see we've got a fact table. I say you can see. Let me also, apparently you can't zoom across all the tabs. There we go. So we've got a fact table, and inside this fact table we've got date, month, product IDs, geographic IDs, and then some numbers. So if I make these columns a bit larger so we can read them, we've got patient copay, net revenue, rebate amount, so on and so on and so on. So these are fixed numbers inside of a spreadsheet. If I look through some of the others, you can see we've got dimensions. Let me once again hit zoom. I'm sure someone's going to tell me a better way to be able to zoom across multiple tabs, but there we go. Again, you've got geographic keys, the territory they're in, the state and the region, so that, this starts to be able to provide some level of linkage across the data set that you are working with. And then if I click through some of these others, we've got, then we've got pivot tables. Everyone loves a pivot table, and quite often this is how these models are then sent out to end users. So you pivot some of that data, you've then got sales by brand, made up brands, and net revenue across all of those types of things, trend analysis, payer analysis, and this type of stuff is reasonably bog standard. If I go and have a look at the dashboard, you've got the demo dashboard, and then you've got a what if calculator that allows a user to be able to interact somewhat with the data in the spreadsheet. So if I make this a bit larger, there we go. So I made this a bit larger, and we've got scenario inputs, and so I can, pick a brand, any brand. I can say I want to do Neurocalm, and obviously the Excel spreadsheet goes to update depending on what percentage I put in and what brand and what deal. And so this is the the demo data that we are using today. And you'll find today that, I'll be open honest, I'm going to use quite a bit of Claude to be able to move data around and do different things because, it's the way that the world works these days in terms of loading stuff up. Now, if I just, let's cut back to my face just briefly. So, in terms of being able to use data and leverage the data, so many industries, organizations use AI, LLMs, Codex, Claude, Grok, you name it. There are a number of different ways to be able to do this. And you'll have seen the other day, if anyone's following the AI news, that SpaceX and Elon Musk just bought Cursor, which is a company that builds primarily an IDE, but then a lot of workflow stuff around, developer experience. To how much they spend? $60 billion on buying them out. And they had only been in trial for a short period of time, but the AI world moves so fast that I don't think SpaceX wanted to lose out on that deal, because they've obviously made a large bet, a heavy bet, on how AI is going to play out over the course of the next few years. And so betting big on one of the toolings and the infrastructure layers that sit around these LLMs, that's going to be the next big thing. And so today we'll deal a little bit with that, primarily just Claude Code, but show you how some of this stuff works. And some of this is just how it is. I saw Databricks. Databricks had a big conference on the last few days. They say that the majority, they would say this, but the majority of database build-outs are now done by their LLMs inside of the stack and aren't done by humans, managed by humans, optimized by humans. It's largely LLM-based, and this is just the way of the world. Now, of course, the difference is when you're building out some of this stuff is it's easy enough to vibe code your way through chunks of this, ask the questions, build the thing out. But how do you know what it's doing is right? If you're going to start using Claude to be able to do data science, that's cool. But at the same time, how do you know the questions that you're putting into the black box and the formulas and the data that it is outputting is actually accurate? And so you still have to have a data engineering team, a data science team, depending on what you're doing, to be able to ensure that the data consistency, data availability, and data quality is what you need it to be. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but the LLMs are not great at adding. Largely because of the way that they work through their data, and they are obviously improving, and the way that you construct a question for an LLM allows that to vary wildly. But at the same time, you still need to make sure that, when you ask the question, you're getting the right answer. And so that still requires some semblance of having someone who knows what they're doing. So this is why organizations engage with us and, come and leverage our skill set and knowledge, because it's both the output from a data quality perspective, but it's also how you interact with that data. And that's, also key to any product build out. You can't build a product and just chuck the data in there and ensure that, assume that a user is going to be able to A, understand what they're doing, and B, want to interact with that product so that they use it on a regular basis and don't find just different ways of doing things. So the user experience and the user interface that drives that user experience is also, absolutely critical to your organization as product. And I talk about products, but it's not necessarily just an outbound facing thing. You don't have to sell anything. But if you make something available to users within inside of your organization, you're effectively shipping a product. And if that product doesn't work in the way that it should work, then you're going to have to deal with far more requests for data coming in, people not understanding how things work, and really having to like leverage humans when you're already paying for a product that should be doing the job. And so, ensure that along with the data quality and the understanding, that you're also building out a product that makes sense. If you do not do that, you've got good data and a bad product, no one's going to use it. If you've got a good product but bad data, no one's going to trust it. Now, the latter is worse, but they both, strike a chord in a lot of the projects we've seen